Keegan Longira, adventurer, motivational speaker, world changer. You're about to join Keegan on his incredible cycling expedition from Cairo to Cape Town. Relive with him every moment, encounter, and emotion of this amazing journey. This series is available in both audio and video.
So Keegan, it's 4 days into the new year, and you're 3 days into your trip. Give us the start of day 3. How does that day pan out?
I remember waking up on the third day and just thinking to myself how strange the seasons are. Because it's 5 a.m, it's pitch black, it's dark. So till about 6 or 7, the sun would rise at about 7 o'clock. And so I remember waking up, going outside. Now, coming into the town, it was a really horrible place to be. The people were really aggressive, and now I need to leave this town, and it's dark. So again, this fear of dogs come up, and I'm just hoping that there's no dogs around. So I'm checking my tracks left and right, just making sure that there's no dogs. Listening, it's really quiet, and cycling out of the town and back onto the main road. And then again on this desert road, cycling. Sun rises, incredible pictures again. I think I remember taking a photo at about 140 kilometers to go to Hurghada, and that's like a town on the coast, also very, beautiful town. And I took that photo, got back on the bicycle, started riding again. And then something happened to me at 9 o'clock that became like a ritual for me. And I think it was 9 o'clock every day. I joke with Brent, and I called it my church time. I had nothing to do. I was in the desert for 2 days in a row. Third day now, there's nothing to look at, literally. After the sunrise, it's dull again. Just one road and desert all around you. And I had this habit of starting to sing to myself. I started singing songs from, great artists that I remember. I remember singing about, all sorts of things. And then talking, thinking about movies and just talking to myself on the bicycle while I'm riding. And eventually, every single time, it started to get emotional for me. That singing, that almost the worship turned into a prayer for me. And I was praying for everybody back home. I was praying that Paige was safe. I was praying that Brent was doing well. I was praying that my dad was, also doing well, and my mom and my sisters. I prayed for people in a way that I've never prayed for people before. We always have this idea of praying for people and using words. And I started to realize that praying wasn't about words. Praying was about connecting your heart with that person through God and just feeling what they feel. Try to put yourself in their situation and just being there for them and just praying the thoughts that are coming to your mind. And eventually, I would spend an hour and a half praying, and all of a sudden it's 10:30 in the day. And for me, that was my first church session. And by the end of it, I was in tears. I was in the desert crying, And again, the desert became like a significant place because, just a desert means a place where you dry, where you feel spiritually dead, where it's, and I was in the desert. At about 11 o'clock in the morning, I got a message from Selma basically telling me that there was a guy in a little town or a resort called Guna. Now, Guna is a very popular place, even for Americans, for Europeans, everywhere, from all over the world, the people come to visit this place. And I was unsure because Guna was about 40 or 50 k's before Hurghada, and Hurghada was the place where I was planning to stay. Okay, so I got this SMS, Dr. Ahmed from Cairo. He's gonna have you to stay there the night. He's heading back to Cairo. He's been there on holiday. And I was like, okay, well, I need to make a decision now. And again, this thought of, okay, well, push to Hurghada, get the kilometers done, and not spend a comfortable night, don't know where you sleep, and have that stress again, or stay with somebody, or stay in a place that's already organized. So I decided to stay in Gona, and got Dr. Ahmed's number, called him. What a great guy. He's also a dentist who volunteers for Operation Smile, and he's been on these amazing missions all over the world. And he invited me to stay at their resort. So came into Gona, which is just off the main road, turned in there, cycled probably 300, 400 meters down the road, and got to this massive boom gate. And there's a security guard standing with his gun and 2 Alsatians on the chain, and asking me for my passport. And by that time, I was just fed up with, the authority in Egypt. And I'm like, do I really need my passport to get into this place? And he's like, yes, you need your passport. Obviously not understanding English much, we're just communicating through signals and facial expressions and that. And so gave him my passport, in an angry way, did his photocopies, went into the gate, because I don't think they really expect guys to arrive there on bicycles, maybe luxury 4x4s and things like this. And I cycled into this place and I was blown away. I was like, compared to the night before, this is 5-star. I mean, there was beautiful views of the Red Sea, old European type houses, and on the resorts, a Mediterranean vibe about it. There's jet skis, there's people on quads, there's all sorts of people there. And I got into the town, phoned the doctor, and he came to meet me, and he rocked up there in his BMW. And again, I was like, this is another world compared to where I've been. And I followed him to his house. We got settled in. He took me to the store, got some supplies, paid for everything, and then went to look at the yachts. And wow, I mean, it was just amazing sight to see these massive yachts. I mean, millions of rands of yachts just in this place. And it was just such a refreshing time. Took me to lunch, and we had a pizza with all his friends there, if you can imagine, like a thatched roof built onto the beach with bamboo sticks as the walls, and people lying and having cocktails on the beach. And I was like, man, I don't want to leave this place, amazing. And I had spent some time there. We had lunch, went back to his flat, and he basically sorted me out with all the supplies I needed for the next couple of days, and then headed back to Cairo. So he was on his way back there, and they had left, and decided it would be a good time to do some reading. And I had my Kindle with me, and the Kindle became a very important part of the trip, and was reading this story about Roald Amundsen and Sir Robert Scott. I mean, the epic race to the South Pole. And I mean, I get goosebumps just thinking about how much the story meant to me. Centuries ago, there was this epic race, and now I'm on my own epic race. And just reading the stories of those adventurers, and the things that they were going through got me through so much. And I remember sitting at the table, my feet up, having a nice cup of coffee, and reading, my mind was consumed by this great adventure. And just the different characters racing for the same thing. I remember then taking my map out, doing my ritual, folding it, and planning ahead to, the border of Sudan. And now, to get into Sudan, the only way to get into Sudan is through a ferry. So it was either through ferry or through private boats. And that was the only way. And I worked out that if I reached there, according to my plan, from that day on, I would miss the ferry. So I would have to wait another week. And I mean, I was already behind world record pace, and this just added more panic and stress to what I was doing. And I remember phoning a couple of guys and phoning Salma and telling her about I'm going to miss the ferry, and they try to organize something, and everyone was just in a panic. It really did seem like the record was out of my reach now. It was gone. That ship had sailed almost. I'd given up on it. And that day I went to bed, and I'd just given up hope on breaking this record, and I was down in a place I've never been before, depressed, and then almost felt for me as if there was no meaning and no reason to doing this. Yeah, so went to bed in comfort, but I remember having really bad dreams that night and just being in a horrible place, waking up often, and yeah, it was Egypt was getting a bit much.
So Keegan, you went to bed the night before really restless, having bad dreams, not in a good place, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, although you were in a good place physically. How did you wake up the next morning? In what kind of place? What kind of state of mind?
I woke up really drained, and it's almost like I'd settled into going through the motions. Got up, showered, ate, had a coffee, packed my bags, left the keys, locked the flat and left the keys inside the post box, and then cycled out of Guna back onto the main road. It felt like I'd been doing this for years. When I got onto the road, started riding, a lot of, I didn't leave too early in the morning because I only had 88 kilometers to do. And, I just remember going through the motions, and then again the dogs. Got to past Hurghada, which was about 60 k's from Gona, really fast kilometers done, and turned to head, in a different direction, and there was a slight climb up about to the horizon, like a slow climb. Still, you could keep your pace well above 23, 24 k's an hour. And I remember cycling past this rubbish dump, and it was nothing. It was just desert and these two big rubbish dumps on either side of the road. As I was cycling, I saw the dogs in the distance, and this freaked me out. Like, I saw the dogs in the distance, and it was me in this road. They started barking, started running at me, probably about 20 dogs. And I just started sprinting. I got out of my saddle and I was sprinting with all the weight on my bag. I just pushed myself to the max. And I just went and I went and I went and I went. And I got back on the seat and I was pushing. And these dogs were gaining on me, behind me from all directions. Gaining. I was going probably like 32 k's an hour. Going. And like the things that were rushing through my head, it was just, I couldn't get away from them. And then eventually I was just like, screw this. Like, braked hard, stopped in the road, and the dogs stopped as well. And I got off my bicycle and they were, trying to come for me. And I just got aggressive. I realized that this is something I need to get over now. And I rose up and I just started shouting at the dogs. And I just started pretending to hit them, and they just stopped where they were. They didn't approach. They didn't run away, they weren't scared, but they just didn't come at me. And I slowly got onto my bike and slowly started cycling away. And the amount of damage that little episode of sprinting did for me could have cost me the whole trip. About 30 k's down the road, after all the adrenaline had, passed, I felt this terrible pain in my right knee and in both my Achilles tendons. I'd done something to myself, but I pushed myself past the limit, and for too long, and the 2 days of cycling before that, my body was just like, no ways. So luckily I had about 30 k's left in the day, but this pain was serious. It was terrible. Carried on cycling towards this little town, Safaga, right on the border of where everything would turn for me, and I would turn back towards the Nile River and cycle back towards the Nile. So that would be my last night on the Red Sea, also an industrial town, very poor. Cycled into that town and had just given up completely. I didn't phone my mom, I didn't speak to my dad, I didn't message Paige, I didn't speak to Salma, who would book me the accommodation and get a discounted rate and things like that. I just cycled straight to a place where I could find, the cheapest place. Pulled my bicycle inside there, booked myself in, paid the money, and I just remember being so low, like just giving up. I could hardly walk. Putting my bicycle in the room, there was a double bed in the room, still no Western toilets, cold shower, horrible, horrible little hotel with a horrible room. And just lying on my bed and crying. Lying flat on my back in all my cycle gear. And just crying, just asking God, why do I need to be here? Could I not suffer like this somewhere else? And being halfway across the world, being away from everybody that loves you, it makes you deal with your heart quickly. And I just cried and I just listened to music. Couldn't speak to anybody, got my wallet and I headed onto the streets to try to look for something to eat. Went to a little supermarket, got into a taxi, and I just given up. If this taxi was going to take me and rob me, it was fine, I didn't care. Got into this taxi, went to a restaurant and ordered a burger. Ate the burger in the restaurant, took some pictures with my GoPro. Got outside the restaurant and nobody knew how to get back to the hotel, or they had never heard of the hotel that I was staying at, the Nile, which is the Nile River. But nobody knew where I was staying. So now I'm outside of this place, in a really bad place, really down, painful, and nobody could take me back to my hotel. It was probably like 5 k's away. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to walk. And as I was about to start walking, this guy pulled up on a motorbike and told the owner of this place he was staying that he knew where I was staying. So I got onto the back of a motorbike with this guy and headed towards back to the hotel. I remember this guy's motorbike cutting out 3-4 times on the trip. Him listening to music, dancing, he was one hand sometimes on the motorbike, in and out of the traffic, over pavements, and I was in the back and I was just filming it with my GoPro. And I was just like, Keegan, you are in an amazing, amazing place. This guy has got nothing and he's happy, And here I'm in a situation where like I've put myself in suffering. I've chosen this and I'm not happy with it. And I think that was a big day for me to realize that I am going to suffer. Things are going to be hard and I'm going to get through it. And that guy on the motorbike, cutting out and not being able to get me to my hotel very quickly, but his attitude for life just changed my perspective. I was very judgmental of them. And all of a sudden, I had a heart for the people around me. I got back to the hotel and put on some music again, and this Ocean song was big again. I was listening to every word, holding on to every promise, and just praying sincerely again to God, I will suffer. I sort of, let go of things a little bit, and I said, I'm going to suffer. I'm going to carry on. And I remember writing in my journal that day for the first time. Wrote a little bit about the days. And folded my map. Got ready to make the journey back towards the Nile River. And that was the end of that day. I don't even remember falling asleep on that day. I remember listening to music on my chest. My phone was on my chest. And I just fell asleep, and that's how I woke up the next morning. And at like 4:30, I woke up.
But Keegan, at this point, going to bed that night, though, had you spoken to any family that day? I mean, any friends Via text message or phone call? I mean, when you were feeling like this?
I remember I sent Brent a couple of messages on WhatsApp and Paige, and eventually my mom and my family had this little group, and I was sending a couple of pictures of the food I'd eaten. I remember Brent was a pillar of strength for me during that time. You know, I couldn't put all this emotional pressure on a lot of people, but Brent just felt my heart. He was sure, just so strong, sending me Bible verses. There's no Bibles, you can't find Bibles in Egypt. You would stop at a place and all you'd want to do is open a Bible. I mean, the internet, I couldn't get on the internet to get like Bible verses online and things like that. So it was almost a blessing for him to send me Bible verses. And we take that for granted. And it was, he pulled me through that day. He really did.
Keegan, I believe this was quite a long day, this next one. How did it pan out?
So it was probably the most pain I've ever experienced on a bicycle. It was seriously tough. Woke up, was really dark, got on my bike, cycled out of the town, and at about 5 o'clock got to a police checkpoint. And I remember the police officer saying to me that there's no tourists allowed to go through until 6 o'clock in the morning. But if I waited till 6 o'clock in the morning, there's no ways I would have made my end destination. Because this was the first mountain pass that I was going to do over the Egyptian mountains in the desert. It was, if I can think of any place that looks similar to it, it's probably like a place like Iraq or something like that. Just really a lot of mountains. And I remember arguing with him, please sir, just let me go through here, I can't, I have an injury, trying to explain all these things to him, and him not letting me go past. Eventually a policeman that spoke English had come, they'd called for one, and he was telling me that if you go over these mountains, like the possibility of being robbed or taken by rebels there's a good possibility. So they needed to escort me. So a police car would be behind me the whole day up until the town. So 170 k's of a car behind me. And this was honestly like the worst day that a car could have been behind me, because I was in serious pain, going really slowly, and with the mountains. So eventually I twisted their arm, they let me go. And at 20 past 5, I started going up the mountains with a police car behind me, of course. I remember every downward pedal stroke with my knee. I didn't think I can't explain the pain. At one stage, I was only cycling with one leg. And as I was going up the mountains, when I was cycling with two, my Achilles tendons were just finished. It felt like they were about to snap. That burning, I think it was like a tendonitis in there. And I kept going. It took me hours to get up the mountain, the first mountain. Then eventually when it got flat, I stopped and these police guys were behind me, and they were just, clapping hands for me, and they were just so impressed that I'd done this with all these bags and stuff on my bicycle. And again, with my attitude change of the day before, I had so much time for them. I was just so, enjoying their company, and just, even though we couldn't talk to each other, just simple gestures, offering water, offering sweets to each other was really cool. Carried on cycling, and then the headwind started. It was just like everything was against me. So the wind would be blowing south, towards the south, every single day, and the day I decided to turn west, back towards the Nile, the wind changed and blew head on. The next day it blew south again. So it was just so unlucky to be there at that time during that day, on a long day. Got to a place where it leveled off and cycled and pushed on. The doctor Ahmed had organized accommodation for me in the town that I was going to that day. I remember stopping for, a bit of lunch. I was too scared to eat any of the cooked food at these little roadside places, and I was buying like biscuits and sweets and things like that. And it wasn't ideal, but at least I wasn't getting sick. Had a Coca-Cola and a little coffee, instant coffee from the place. And then pushed on. So at every 30 or 40 kilometers there would be a police check, and at these police checks the escort would change. So a different group of police would be following me. And at every single police check, the police would want me to get into the van so that they could shoot ahead, drop me off at the town and get back to their business. I was legally allowed to cycle, but they didn't want me to cycle. They wanted me to get into the van the whole time. And this included them trying to grab my bike and put it on the van, making jokes and things like that. And by this time I was getting really frustrated with them. I was ready to rage. Often I was on the phone with Salma and asking her to explain in Arabic, just, to tell these policemen that what I was doing and what I was trying to accomplish. And eventually we got to this town. They checked me into my hotel and said they would see me at the front of the hotel at 6 a.m. the next day, and if I was late, they wouldn't be helping me. Not that I wanted their help at all anyway, the relationship was I was just sick of them. I remember booking myself into this hotel, a really cheap place, walking up the stairs with my bicycle, putting my bike in my room, taking my cycle shorts off and feeling this pain in my, under my, where my legs started, and on the between my legs where I sat on the bicycle. And I tried to get to a mirror, and I looked at what had happened in the mirror, and there was a small sore, swollen red though. I couldn't walk without my cycle shorts on. I was taking 3 painkillers and wondering what was going on. Still no hot water. I had a cold shower, got into some warm clothes, and it was freezing. I remember it wasn't that cold. I was just shivering. I had all my layers of clothing on, and I was just shivering and shaking. I couldn't move. I couldn't walk without, shaking. And I remember being very worried about it. It was swelling and swelling and swelling. And by the end of the night, it was the size of my fist. And I thought, now, everything I've gone through over the past days, injured my knees. My knees are still killing me. Achilles tendons, desert, headwind, and now this. I was just like, maybe this isn't something I'm supposed to do. Maybe this isn't for me, I went downstairs and again had a moment with a person that changed my perspective. This guy was a volunteer worker from Cairo who basically worked in orphanages and did, basically got sponsors to build orphanages all over the country. And what an incredible guy, just speaking to me. We took some photos together. And the guy that was making the coffees, a young guy, probably 19, 20 years old, that worked at the hotel, he kept bringing us cappuccinos. And I remember him being so proud that he was serving the white South African guy who's trying to break a world record. And he was taking photos, and he asked me to sign things for him, and he brought his dad and his family, and people were bringing me food and pizza. And here I was, worrying about myself again. And these people were inspired. And I started to just feel like if you're inspiring somebody, if it's one person during the day, you need to get yourself up and you need to get going in the morning. And that inspired me just to know that these people didn't even know me, but they were inspired. They were moved. The next day, their life was going to be different. They were going to do something small to live better, to do more, to chase a dream. And that was big for me. I remember going back up to the room, really worried about the infection. I was still shaking. And phoning Dr. Llewellyn from Woodbank, and him just asking me these questions, Not to sound graphic or anything, but it had spread into my testicles, into that region. And I was worried that I had a cancer or something like that. And he just started asking me questions of what I'd taken, what I was doing wrong, what this could be. And eventually I told him about all the antibiotics I had in my medical aid kit, took a couple of them, and just hoped that it would get better. I mean, it was the strangest thing I've ever had. Really painful. By the time I was going to bed, it was just, there was pus coming out of the sore, and it was like on my shorts and things like that. It was disgusting. But it was the sort of pain that I was going through. And that night I couldn't sleep. That pain from the infection, the knees, the Achilles tendons was just so much. So much. I remember listening to music, taking every single word from every song just to inspire me and build me up that I could carry on the next day. And yeah, I remember, going to bed in that pain, waking up literally every 30 minutes with pain, taking more painkillers, and still having that ache in gone into my legs. It was terrible.
To find out what happens next on this amazing journey, go to www.keegan.co.za to purchase the next chapter.